welcome to another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Jamie Johnson, the legal and government correspondent, and it's now entering spring election season, and today we have a candidate for elective office here in the city of Hudson, John Hoggatt. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jamie.
Well, so you are a candidate for mayor, and we have some preset questions, and I guess we're going to try and go down kind of in order, so make everything fair for the different candidates. So let's start with the background and qualifications, and just tell us about yourself. And
Sure. Before I start, I'd like to thank you, Jamie, for taking the time to put these interviews together. I think it's a great way to get all the candidates out there and express ourselves. It's really a valuable service to the city of Hudson, so I thank you. I've been on the city council for the past 7 years as a District 5 alderperson, and when you say that loud, you're like, that's kind of a lot of years. I don't know. In that time, I've served on the Public Utilities Commission, Public Safety Committee, the Fire Board, and the Cable Board, which is the board that governs the river channel here. I'm currently on the Common Council, Finance Committee. I'm the chair of the Public Works Committee. I'm also the chair of the Trail Advisory Committee, which is new, that works on paths, sidewalks, safe routes to schools, all kinds of things that are involved in biking and walking.
okay,
And then I've been on the Urban Forestry Board since that began, which helps maintain our trees that are in public spaces.
okay,
For those that don't know me, I graduated from the University of Wisconsin. I'm a map maker or cartographer by degree, and that's kind of what ended up me bringing my wife and I to Hudson. I got a job after leaving Wisconsin DOT in Eagan, working for a company called ESRI, Environmental Systems Research Institute, and I was selling computer mapping software at the time, which is commonly known as GIS, or Geographic Information Systems.
okay,
So my wife grew up in Afton, and I didn't really know that much about the Twin Cities, although I went to high school in New Ulm, and she said, we should move to Hudson because we'll be right on the river. This would be a great place to hang out. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Lakes are better than rivers. Anyway, she's right. Rivers are better than lakes because the St. Croix is awesome.
yeah,
So we live and work downtown here in Hudson. I have a 3.5 block commute. Our office is at 701 2nd Street. It's that way. And I only live about 2 blocks from here as well. So it's really, really nice to be able to live downtown, work downtown, walk, bike, everything. And when I'm not working or being an alderperson, you can find me in the park or shopping in the shops or eating at one of our awesome restaurants that we're totally spoiled with here in Hudson.
so you got some real close-up look at the Vine Street improvements.
Yeah, in fact, it went right by my building, and we ended up having some kind of strange flood from it too. So yeah, I really got to know the Vine Street project, and I was also the chair of Public Works at the time. It was a good project. It went really well. I think the city is benefiting from it greatly as a road thoroughfare. So to me, in the past 7 years of service on city council and on numerous boards and committees have really given me a good firsthand knowledge of how the city works, how funding occurs, budgets, the budget cycle, really the nuts and bolts of what city government is all about. And I think that, plus my 22 years of running various businesses, gives me a good set of skills and experience to be the mayor of Hudson. So if I'm elected, I really think I can draw upon all of that to really help us do a good job here in Hudson.
Great. So what do you feel are the mayor's most important responsibilities?
Well, a couple of people asked me, what do you do as mayor? And I said, well, I kind of know, but I really want to know. So what I did was I looked it up on the Wisconsin City County Management Association, their definition of duties of a mayor with an administrator. So some cities don't have administrators, therefore the mayor takes on a lot more work. But we have Devin Willies, the city's administrator currently. So the mayor serves as the chief executive officer of the city. We're also the policy leader, presides over city council, also votes in case there's a tie.
Right, only in case of a tie.
Only
right?
in case of a tie, correct. Represents cities in meetings with and presentations to other governmental units, businesses, communities, groups, and so on. Works with residents of the community to receive their comments, complaints. So, the mayor is always the one who gets the 2 a.m. call, right? If the plow gets stuck in front of your house. Not often, but sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's an important role because when once you become, and I've elected, and I've done this as an alderperson, that you really become a conduit for your constituents, citizens in my district, but in this case, it would be for the entire city. So what that means is that people have access to someone that can help streamline and help things through, and that's problem solving outside of city council or in committees, and that's just helping people out. And I think that's one of the most important responsibilities of a mayor, being able to be accessible and provide assistance to citizens. Also, I think the mayor can provide structure for annual planning, as well as vision, mission, and strategic planning. I'm not sure about previous mayors, but to me, that's a very important part, because you really want to know which way the city is going, and we're all kind of working towards the same common goals. Without that, you kind of lose a little bit of motivation, but in many ways, it can be fiscally challenging, because we're working at odds against different things that are going on in the city. So if we're working together, we've got our best interest at heart, and now I understand that a fire department isn't necessarily putting off a park, it's just priority order, that kind of thing. So I think the mayor has to really understand the needs of the city and kind of help coordinate that as well. Finally, I think one of my core strengths is networking and managing groups to facilitate creativity and growth, and I really think that combined with all the other mayor responsibilities really is something that I bring to the table that really adds a lot of strength to the position.
Okay. So we get turned to issues. We've talked about the responsibilities, the qualifications, background, and your experience on the city council. So what do you see as the most important issues to be addressed now in the next 2 years?
You know, I was talking to Nate when I got here, and I've done this interview a couple more times with you in particular as well, and I've gone back and looked at some of them have changed a lot. Like we're building a high school right now, and we have the middle school, and all of a sudden that isn't on the ticket anymore, which is kind of nice. And whether or not we were going to turn the golf course into Carmichael Ridge, well, that's now in progress. So I had to kind of scratch my head a little bit, but after going through my list here, I wrote down a number of things, and I like to group it kind of like public safety. We're going to get a new police chief coming up here in March.
That's right.
We're working on speccing out and trying to put together funding dollar amounts for a fire station. The EMS also is considering locating itself at Ward Avenue, so that'd be 2 groups going there. And then the new EMS staffing model, short and long term, that's definitely an issue that is on the ticket for the next 2 years. As far as public works goes, we might be getting a new public works director. Not sure about this year, but maybe next year. Hanley Road and plans for the upper section of Vine Street from 9th to Wisconsin, that's definitely on the ticket. Carmichael Corridor Study, I'm not sure if you've been tracking that, but we commissioned that from the southern limits of the city all the way up to where it hits County A to try to figure out all the traffic flow. DOT has been concerned about traffic counts and how we get people off as more and more people start coming down 94. That's going to be a really big one. But the corridor itself is, there's a lot happening there. St. Croix Meadows, there's a lot of development that should be taking place starting in, I don't know if it'll be later this year, but in 2019, and that also impacts what happens on Carmichael.
Certainly.
Community development-wise, at the end of this year and starting in 2019, it's our 10-year mandatory comprehensive plan update. What do they call it? An unfunded mandate. So we have to do it ourselves. Actually, it's a really good opportunity to see what's happening in our community.
That's true of every municipality.
That's
has
right.
to do
Yep.
that.
Every 10 years. So this is the cycle. The timing is actually great, considering everything that's going on in Hudson. I think it's a good opportunity for that. Annexations are being contemplated. 2 TIF districts, one at St. Croix Meadows, and then one downtown. That's tax increment financing development for those that aren't sure what a TIF is. And then also downtown parking. You can have my notes if you want them after this.
Yeah.
The final recreation, and there's many, many more things, but this is what I consider the hot list for me anyway. Lakefront Park Master Plan is wrapping up, coming up February 5th, which is Monday. They'll be unfolding the final view of that. It's been 2 or 3 rounds of what what should we do with Lakefront Park and its redevelopment? There's actually a question on that, so I'll skip past that. And then Trail Advisor Committee has been talking to St. Croix County in terms of how can we hook up to the Loop Trail, which is where the new bridge is. There's a
Up in Holton.
That's right. The County F down there is part of the Great River Trail that goes all the way down to La Crosse for those. So how do we hook up to that? And then there's an additional thought of how do we hook up to Willow River State Park coming out of on bike trails. So these are things that for long-term planning you want to start considering because they do have price tags on them. So those to me are, it's a pretty big list, but there's a lot going on.
Yeah, and so when you say most important issues, I'm just taking that apart. What I heard you do, you kind of start out with public safety, infrastructure, then you get into like enjoyment of life issues like
That's right.
trails and
Yep.
the parking. You know, so people do how far are they willing to walk in order to go to the businesses downtown?
Yep.
And
Yep.
clearly, the businesses want to show that they're open for business, and so. I'd love to be able to ask more follow-ups, but I also want to make sure that we get through our questions.
you
So
bet.
maybe we'll hit on some of those.
I'll put that over here.
But so what's your position on allowing or limiting more residential and commercial development? And you had already mentioned also in your last answer about annexation. So, is there a need for the city to annex more land? I know there's lots of ways you can go with this answer because you mentioned about the comprehensive plan.
That's right.
And we also mentioned the TIFs. So I'm sure that both of those, I'll turn it over to you. What do you think should be our position as far as limiting development or annexing land?
Well, I think growth is good and can help sustain Hudson and keep our taxes in check while potentially raising our property values. So it's good for your home and my home, depending on how we grow. That being said, we need to grow responsibly, and we need to grow to make sense. You can't just put in 10,000 homes in a lot next to it, annex it, and hopefully it's all going to work out. Why? Because our challenges are you have to assess the impacts on our growth, which includes water, wastewater, fire, EMS, public works. All these will have more demands on them when we consider growth. I think the biggest limiter that we have is our wastewater treatment plant. We have funds.
And we've been hearing that for several years
That's
now.
right. And, what's now St. Croix Meadows, capacity from that was factored into our current wastewater treatment facility. But new developments, multifamily home, condos, single-family home, those will have an immediate impact on flow into there. So should we build, we have money set aside in the public utilities in the sewer to build a new treatment plant, but where are you going to build it? Often you need access to water for discharge and things like that. So one of the things I've learned about recently is that you can build a holding station, and that then waits and holds sewage until the treatment plant is at low capacity, and then you can actually generate more through your current facility by staging it.
Is part of that the improvements in technology that it's allowed?
Yeah.
Some of these other ideas.
Not only technology, but just better ideas and better mousetraps. Because treatment plants are expensive, and again, they need water to be able to handle that. So having a holding station doesn't have that requirement.
Right.
That makes a big difference.
Sure. Okay. It opens up options. Anyway.
It really does. And then if you could say, well, let's say we could build 2 holding stations, and they can hold stuff for a long time. When there's low capacity, all of a sudden we're fine for another 50 years. That would need to be a study, I'm sure, but
Right.
at least we have options. So, and like you said, fortunately, the question of short and long-term growth really gets down to the comprehensive plan, because we talk to citizens, businesses, other governmental entities, and we all come up with a plan and agree upon what the next 10 years is going to look like. So even if I think we can grow like gangbusters, there are checks and balances that really keep us in shape for how we're going to do that. Thank goodness, because I'm an optimist. I'd say, well, let's just churn and burn, but that's not good for the city. So, in a nutshell, we got to grow smart and responsibly as best we can.
Okay. And so, in the end, should the city annex more land?
I think there are some good opportunities for annexation. There's the property just south of, I think they call it the Lee property. That's directly adjacent to water and sewer now. So it's not a stretch to be able to add that. There's a couple off of Carmichael, was it Atwood and is it the Gagnon property?
Yeah, okay.
They're also
Yeah, that's technically in the town, but it's kind of like almost an
right, and
island now.
it makes sense from it. It's not a huge stretch to run pipe and sewer way out there. It's directly adjacent to what we have, and I don't think it would radically alter traffic flow and things like that. And I think that will be borne out.
Well, that's why in a
plan.
comprehensive plan they have extraterritorial zoning. You're not planning it down to the square foot as far as what's going to be necessarily annexed, but you got to look at a big picture, long term, and needs arise. And also, law changes, and we have
That's right.
the city of River Falls and the town of Troy have had their little lawsuit, and now the courts are interpreting what's adjacent might be not necessarily directly adjacent, it's just near.
Right, close.
Yeah,
Right.
and so again, perhaps more options than what we saw 10 years ago or 15 years ago.
Yeah, and I believe the comprehensive plan actually is a 30-year look at what you're trying to do. So it really, to me, I mean, without that, you're, again, just kind of planning with a blindfold on and hoping for the best. We don't want to do that, so.
All right. So is the city's plan for maintaining and improving the infrastructure sufficient? Why or why not? Now, you've got special insight being the chair of the Public Works, and you ranked it kind of up there with public safety as far as, really the important stuff of the city. So how do you feel we're doing with regard to infrastructure?
Well, as the chairperson of Public Works, I do feel comfortable in saying that we have a good plan for maintaining and improving our infrastructure. And one of the things you learn, that I've learned, is that we have developed our own 5-year capital improvement plan within Public Works that feeds into the city's 5-year capital improvement plan. Because one of the things we were doing is we had an annual road budget for maintaining roads like resurfacing and curb and gutter and things like that, but that's not building new roads. Vine Street was a complete rebuild. It hadn't been touched in 30 years, and we had water main and things in there that were over 100 years old.
Right.
In fact, we've fixed some parts of the city that had wood pipe. I didn't even know wood pipe existed, right? I mean, that's old pipe.
Right, exactly.
So without having that plan, which we do now, in fact, we talked about it last night at Public Works, looking forward now that we have a 5-year look, and then we have projects that we know are actually beyond that. So beyond 2022, the I-94 interchange, the 11th Street Bridge, those things. And what that really gives us a good insight as to what's our annual maintenance thing, and then where can we bond for improvements. We bonded for Vine Street, so we're kind of on a 2-year borrowing cycle. We have a really good credit rating. We're not blowing past our borrowing limits like whatsoever. In Hudson, we have a really good ceiling for that, and we're able to service debt really well. So we can take on a healthy diet of improving roads, and that doesn't mean just scratching it and putting new tar on. That means rebuilding it. And fortunately, we don't have that many of those left. And the big one, like 2nd Street, DOT is going to handle most of that, except for from Vine Street to the bridge over here. We have a really old pipe in there too, and it goes from a 12-inch main down to like a 4-inch water main going into North Hudson, which is not good. And there might even be some wood pipe in that section too, but there's some pipe that is like 90 years old. So eventually you want to upgrade that so it's all running at the same flow rate, and
Sure.
you don't have hydrant challenges if you have a fire, and there's all things to consider with that. So using our current plan, we'll be commissioning a pavement management program, which gives us a better handle on costs going forward as well. And then I got to say, I'm just extremely confident where we've come and where we're headed in managing our infrastructure. And one of the things that, by coordinating this long-term vision, the public utilities could say, oh, I see you're going to be working on Vine Street in 2019. We know that there's pipe in there that we have to fix, and they're able to do their forecasting and budgeting as well. So this is where you really get cost saving, cost improvement by coordinating projects.
Right.
Yep.
You don't want to have to go in 6 months later and open it back up because, oh, we forgot to do this, or this other agency needs
People
that.
get mad. What do you mean you just opened up that street and you didn't tell us? Yeah, that's true. That's exactly right.
So, okay. Anything more on infrastructure? Because what I'm hearing is, while you're saying it's not necessarily a static plan, it's always evolving and improving,
Yes.
we're in pretty good shape.
I think so.
Okay.
I do.
So now on to one that was really a hot button issue over the last year, and that is the EMS. What are your ideas on how we financially sustain the EMS and then solve these staffing problems? And I guess I don't want to necessarily assume anything when we say staffing problems. I'll let you define the problem and then the solution.
I think with all problems, I'll just say that the more you study it, the more you feel comfortable having a conversation about it. So in the past few weeks, and I knew that I'd be talking about it during the campaign, that I'm really starting to get a pretty good handle on the situation as a whole. Because even as an alderperson going through last year, and you don't serve on that committee unless you're really wanting to know it, it doesn't just present itself in a way that, oh my God, I can totally understand what's going on here. So I would like to begin by stating that I personally am in favor of publicly funded safety, and that includes EMS. And when I pick up the phone and call 911, I know that the police, fire, or EMS is going to respond in a timely manner and be accountable to its community. So publicly funded EMS to me is not an option. That's why I ended up voting to keep EMS as a city entity.
Okay.
Some people are maybe still question that. To me, it became very obvious at the end, being owned and managed by the city gives us total control and accountability to our citizens. And if it's also obvious to me that if we were to privatize this, we'll never come back. It's too costly and too much of a challenge to bring that type of thing back from there. And to me, that was sort of the final straw. And
well, is there a short-term gain by privatizing, though? I mean, you're selling some of those assets and seeing influx?
There's good and bad with every deal.
Okay.
The number one thing is we were no longer in control of the type of service, how long, what kind of rates we were going to be handling, if there was, our trucks might be going somewhere else. It just became so clear that we were losing complete control over an entity that you really, to me, it's like police and fire. I consider it the third part of the stool. These all work together to give us good public safety. And that's why I want to state that to begin with. So I'll continue on here. We currently fund our EMS from two sources of revenue: taxes and reimbursements. And reimbursements is broken into two parts. The reimbursement number is Medicare, Medicaid, and insurance per run. And those rates are set, they're fixed. Medicare is a federal thing. Medicaid is a Wisconsin deal, and then your insurance company pays. Right. Medicaid right now in Wisconsin is pretty low compared, it's like 200 something. Minnesota does like 470. So our rates are kind of weird in that sense. The second reimbursement is from our partners, North Hudson, Town of Troy, and those dollars are generated on a per capita basis. They would like to perhaps adjust that model, but right now that's how it works. So there's a chunk of money that the Hudson kicks in, and then each one of our partners.
So when you say they would like to see that adjusted, you're talking about the surrounding communities.
Right.
Okay.
And I'll get into that a little bit more here. So currently EMS has a cash surplus of around $500,000. I didn't know that, but I do now. The Council and EMS Commission voted to change our staffing model to help more with consistent scheduling and wages. Okay. We no longer use what's a stipend model, where I pay you X amount of dollars to be basically on call. You could be at the station or at home or at Target or whatever, and if the call came out, you're on call, and then you would get your stipend for responding to.
Right.
Well, that's a bit of a challenge for not only from scheduling, but to have full-time ALS units. You need people right there and then 24/7. So the idea in the commission and the council voted to change the staffing model to pay full wages for full-time and part-time. So the part-time is 24 hours shifts, up to 24, and full-time is 40. I think we
per week.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll currently have 5 or 6 full-time paramedics and approximately 20 part-time EMTs. And then there's a couple of floaters in there. So what that allows us to do is more consistently schedule. Not only the stipend rates aren't all out of whack, but we have consistently better hours to schedule our team. And this came.
So the peak hours will be covered maybe by a full and a part-time person?
Right, and then there's also a little bit of flexibility for overtime as well.
Okay.
So right now, this has just flipped, changed hands, or not changed hands, but has just started basically in 2018. So They're working out the bugs, but it should, both the,
So instead of on demand or on an on-call stipend basis, this is more consistent. You know your hours that you need to cover.
That's
and
right.
That's what your budget's going to be.
that's right.
Okay.
And I think from, any business standpoint, it's probably easier to manage it that way. And you should get more consistent coverage as well. That's the hope. So as the option 3 that we voted for, we'll be continuing to add more full-time and part-time staff per year to keep up projected run volumes. So every time our population grows, more things, you have run volumes go up, we have X amount of people. You can calculate an average reimbursement rate, and that gives you kind of, hey, this is the amount of service we need to be able to handle the situation. So there are, as run volumes going up, we're continuing to try to staff more to get to sort of a perfect number, I would call it. It's not perfect, but a good number to give a really good level of service from our EMS. So to me, I think that's a great step forward. There are 3 long-term concerns with this approach that everyone has kind of pitched in on. It doesn't factor in any capital expenses of new physical space at Ward Avenue. So that's an outlier capital expenditure. How much is it going to cost to, spruce it up and put in bay doors that work and things like that? Number 2, the cash surplus is projected to decrease. That $500,000 is projected to decrease over time, but currently doesn't really come close to running down for another 10 years. So it's had about 50,000 after 10 years. So it's not like a huge leak. It's just that we know that cash surplus is slowly dwindling over time. Okay. Finally, our current partners are seeking a reduced payment model versus what they are staffing, and the main reason is they'd like to commit to a different version of our agreement, but they're up against their own levy limits. So if you can't raise your taxes and your funds because that's based on net new growth of your community,
Right.
what do you do? My $10 keeps getting hammered every year. Now I only have $3 to give, and can we come up with a different model that based on run volumes and things like that? I don't know how that would work. We actually voted that down recently. I'm still in favor of trying to work something out with the communities because that's just good government, I think. And I think that's good.
Partnerships.
Yeah, we need to work together. And St. Croix County has also has ideas about how potentially that they could be partners as well. So really the challenges for sustainability relies on how much we can fund increasing staffing. So how much are we going to increase to serve our run volumes? Where will we hit another ceiling? And we have limited funds, and so do our partners. So somewhere along the line, we might have overestimated how many staff we need because we don't have the money to support it.
Okay.
In addition to raising more non-takes, so there are ways to generate revenues based on taxes, and this is where it gets good, I think. We can generate, and you're completely aware of generating funds by referendum because that's how the school was be able to be successful in its long-term mission. We can bond, and then we can also raise private funds, which some communities in Wisconsin have done a really good job at funding their EMS through private donations. And I mean,
Or a combination of all 3 of those.
that's exactly right, and that's what I think. All these are viable and need to be considered going forward. So to me, we really need to get
Do you see a
creative.
particular order to that? Do you think that maybe the private donations, if that were to be able to take off first, it would give some traction then to maybe a referendum or
Yeah,
bonding?
I think so, and I think that we are. There's a funding challenge with the new fire department as well, and maybe there's an opportunity to referendum for a public safety referendum, not unlike the school where it said should we do the high school and the middle school, and then there's 2 other
Multiple
options.
question, public safety.
That's right. So maybe that would be a really good way to bring it out there, and we'll kind of see what the community's thinking. And we've already got some funds privately available. So yeah, I really think we got to get creative in order to make this sustainable. So and in the end, I'm confident. I think we're going to be able to go make a way forward, providing good, reliable, sustainable city-owned EMS. We all do better when we work together towards a common goal. And I think until we really understand and put this together, I think it's hard. But when you put it together and you start having a vision, and you guys did such a great job with the schools, I really think that's a great model to follow in terms of building consensus and everyone gets on the same page, and then I was like, okay, this is a smart decision. Let's go ahead and do it. And
Right.
you know, it
People
really,
want to know that you did your homework.
That's right.
And the background.
I don't want to just say we need $50 million, and then in reality we only need 10. So I mean that you know that
Right.
takes time. So
Yeah.
so that's my
EMS question.
that is a question and my answer.
All right. So now, moving on to parking.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think can be done to solve the downtown parking problems? And there's another question that assumes certain thing, that there is a problem. And I've heard some people say we don't have a parking problem, we have a walking problem.
Right. Having lived downtown since 2004, I really come to appreciate the parking challenges. Daytime's not bad, but nighttimes and weekends are crazy. Anytime there's a special event, people are parked all over. I live on First Street, and they're parked all the way up to St. Corey
Booster
Street.
days,
Yeah, Booster Day,
added airfare.
which is great. So we can handle a lot of that. I still think there's a capacity issue on nights and weekends that even walking can't overcome. And by not having a structure, one of the things that was identified in the parking study is that people are really starting to park in the neighborhoods, and that gets kind of weird too, you know, like because you're now competing with residents. And so is there something that we can handle? And, you know, also with the new bridge going through, they thought maybe there'd be a decline in parking, but traffic sort of slowed down for about a week, and then now it seems like we have more traffic than we ever have. So, and I get a lot of comments that people like to come to Hudson because they like it. We have good restaurants, we have nice shopping, and so we're popular, and that's good. We got a new brewery, and there's things are going to happen at the Stone Tap, and things are not slowing down here. So I think we still have a parking challenge. So how can we help? Parking study recommends more surface parking and more paint to kind of better define our current spaces. Charge more per hour and monitor it better to help with parking turnovers. Because a lot, you know, if you're not being dinged for a ticket, then you know I'm like everybody else. You kind of just forget that you're parked there, and then 3 hours later, like, oh geez, I got to move. So that helps with parking. They also recommend charging on nights and weekends. I don't know if I agree with that, but
These were recommendations out of independent study.
that's right. And what they did in the study is they take the whole system and say you have to consider a network of parking, not just this one or that or this or that. So the ramp factors in as part of the network.
Right.
So if you build a ramp where the fire station is, after they move up in the hill, you could put a ramp in there. That would be one. There could be one at Wells Fargo. And then with all the surface parking and the street parking and everything painted, then all of a sudden we have a system. And to me, that was like, the light went on. I'm like, okay, when you look at it as a system, that really helps to accommodate parking as a whole. And I think we're at that point. We're past that point. I think the night weekend deficit is like at 300 spaces. It's a lot. There's definitely a known parking deficit. So I don't think we can just do one thing. I think we end up having to do many things. And my wild card notion is that I think Hudson is long overdue for consideration and implementation of public transportation. We don't have any buses. We've got a handful of taxis, so I can't take a bus from up in the hill and go down and take it back. How awesome would that be? I mean, I think there are people downtown that are kind of stuck downtown here too that would like to be able to go shopping on the hill. We could actually link up to the busing over that Met Council has just extended all the routes all the way right over here to just across the river.
Okay.
So even a bus to connect to there, which will allow people to commute that way as well. That really could help solve some of our parking challenges, and also be a good service to the community.
Again, something for a longer term solution.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you start the discussion. I don't know how long. I really haven't studied public transportation a lot. Is that a private entity? Is that a city supported entity? Do we just maintain the bus stops and the routes, and then a company runs on? I have no idea. I really haven't truly taken a look at that, but I plan to in the next couple of months here. So. Okay.
But as opposed to just one notion, that is parking, trying to do a system as opposed to looking at individual components.
Yeah, that to me makes the most sense. And that came out of the parking study.
Are you good on parking now? Because
yeah.
I see the next issue as being kind of, the redevelopment taking place at Lakefront Park. It seems to me that if we've got a parking problem downtown, why are we looking for more development downtown?
Right.
So,
Good questions. When we hired Ed from SEH, Ed Freer, who came to them as late in his career and has done an amazing amount of lakefront development, water park. He's, if you've been to Chicago, any of that redevelopment downtown, Milwaukee, Cleveland, River Falls. I mean, his resume is impressive. And we said, well, can you please take a look at from 94 all the way to St. Croix Street, and not just the park, but 2nd Street and downtown, and how does this all kind of weave together? So as he explained it, we've been growing organically over time, which means that everyone has got an idea, and if you're really fast and quick about your idea, you can get a playground in the park, or you can have a different band shell, but it doesn't really fit into a master plan. So
right.
Again, we've stepped back, and kind of like the Carmichael corridor and the parking, by having a plan and looking at it, that hopefully can start addressing parking as one of the major issues. And they've seen the parking study too. I believe that a lot of that's critical to providing service to be in the park. And once again, creating a system and not just saying, oh, we just need parking on 1st Street. As far as the park itself, redevelopment, I look at several groups of things that are going to happen in their paths and walkways in the waterfront. You got recreation spots, there's gathering spots like the beach house and the band shell, and we're talking about a beer garden where the parking garage, or that little bathroom down by the boat ramp is. Leisuring areas like benches, trees, and then other, Urban Forestry Board has a tree trek in there now. You can pick up a pamphlet and do a little trail on that, or bicycle rentals, kayak rentals. They're just creating more activity, and like you said, the linchpin is parking. So if we follow suggestions of the master plan, which is going to be presented this month in February, and stage the development of these groups, the waterfront should and really will come together in a great way as a long-term plan. It might take 10 years to implement all the really awesome ideas that they've come up with. But at least we're not saying we're just going to wing it again, because that just doesn't work.
Okay.
And I'm not saying people have been winging it. I'm just saying that, the more we all get together and support our ideas, the better off we are when it comes to, longer term vision. And that we've been saying it with the comp plan. I believe it's true with the redevelopment of the lakefront and those kind of ideas. So a couple ideas include some docking along the lake, the shore there, but also creating a corridor, Walnut Street, under the arch, out under the dike, as kind of a possible opportunity for even a farmer's market, or ways for people to go up and down there, and maybe once a week, that you can have that kind of thing, and try to generate not only group activities, but other places that people can go for self-use, but also group as well. And I'm excited to see the plan, because they took a couple of different ideas and have merged it into one, and this will be good for Lakefront.
All right. So now we're on to the kind of the last question, and that's the other issues you feel that the council should address, and then, kind of wrap it up with any additional closing remarks that we haven't already specifically touched.
Sure. I think, and I came up with 5, and I know there's more, but the comprehensive plan, I just want to mention it once again, because this is, not every council gets a crack at it, or mayor, or, if it's not every 10 years, then it's kind of cool. It's like what did we just have, a super blood moon, blue blood moon with a lunar eclipse. It doesn't happen all the time. So to me, this is a good opportunity. I think the council really will have an opportunity to get involved in that. I put updated tax assessment. I'm not entirely sure, but once our property values get out of whack statistically with our assessed values, you have to reassess taxes.
Right.
And I believe we're there. I think it's going to happen this year or next year.
It's a fairness issue.
That's right, and it's governed by the state of Wisconsin. It's not it is a statistical function of math versus property versus assessed versus.
Fair market.
That's right. Emerald Ash Borer, if you're not familiar with it, is now 2 miles away over in the.
I didn't know it was that close.
That's right, and one of the fastest reasons it spreads is people haul firewood. around. It's unfortunate. And if you see the map, it's going up and down, 94, 35W, and it's come out this far, so it's there. So within the next, we say 3 to 5 years, we'll be starting to have the challenge of removing ash trees and trying to plant new. We have aggressive strategies to try to start managing them now. The really big ones, the old ones that are hard to take down when they've been infected.
Right.
Those you start to attack. But this is a budget item that can be anywhere from $750,000 to $1 million. So do you start saving and saving for it? Because when it hits, do you really want to bond for it, or
Right.
do you just have money set aside? So it's a budget issue, and we've been watching, and we're starting to put it on. I think starting next year, we'll actually start putting
It
money.
should be on our radar screens and not surprise anybody.
Yeah, surprises aren't good because you have to make bad choices when it comes to funding. I mean, I think we all know that personally, but as a city, these can be big numbers. So,
Okay.
recreational trails, we meaning the Trail Advisory Committee met with St. Croix County. They've finished their trail plan and now have opportunities for us to look at how to connect. We talked about this earlier. And just for us to get it on our budget and other projects that we're working on, if we were to upgrade 11th Street, they've already recommended to upgrade it to include a trail crossing, so that rather than you and me having to ride down to Carmichael and go cut across that way, we can go across 11th much easier, and it's far less impact. So if we're all going to do it together, we might as well coordinate.
Right.
So I think that one we can just put on the radar. And then finally, I put public transportation on here again because it'd be good to just start knowing and understanding and talking about it. If it never comes to fruition, well, fine. But, we're a growing city. I think we're big enough that we could really.
It's time to study the pros and cons.
Yeah. So in closing, again, I'd like to thank you very much for doing this. It's a great, not only public service, but gives us an opportunity to express ourselves. I'd like to recognize Mayor O'Connor for running for re-election and his service to Hudson. Best of luck to him. He's on tomorrow, I think. So it's been an honor and a privilege to serve the citizens of Hudson for the past 7 years now as District 5 alderperson. I will continue on in that capacity should I not be elected mayor, and that's okay with me. I think it's an excellent way to serve our community, so I'm good with that. I've made a lot of friends. I have a really good relationship with city staff. I just have a really good connection to Hudson. I think that and working directly with people to help solve problems and be accessible and just be a good public servant, I think in this case gives me an excellent set of skills and a baseline to be mayor of Hudson. And I think I feel really qualified and ready to do that job. So if I'm elected, I will work hard, and I feel really confident that that's something I can do.
All right, very good. You had your opportunity, and you covered all your bases, so I appreciate you coming on the show, and just encourage our viewers, if you are Hudson City residents, to get out there and vote in April, correct?
April 3rd is the election. Remember, every vote counts, for sure.
Yes, and we've seen some close ones across the country, so thank you for watching, and we'll be here again with some more candidates for all the races. Thank you.